Chapter 11 More Than Words. Just like you, Nina finished softly, reaching up to touch Ethan's face. Serious on the outside, but full of love on the inside. Ethan laughed, a wet, joyful sound, as he cradled the tiny bundle closer. He is perfect. He is ours. He is the best thing we ever wrote together. Life became even more beautiful with Elias. The grand mansion, once cold and quiet, was now filled with laughter, books, and the pitter-patter of little feet. Ethan, once known as the most serious and unapproachable CEO in the city, was now famous for carrying his son in one arm and a stack of books in the other. He worked from home more often now, saying that the best board meetings happened in the library with his family nearby. Nina watched them often, father and son reading together in the library, walking through the bookstore, exploring the garden. She realized that her story had come full circle. She had once been the quiet one in the background, the observer, the writer. Now she was the center of a beautiful life, the creator, the beloved. She continued writing, but her words had changed. There was no more fear, no more confusion, no more sadness. Pages of silence had transformed from a diary of loneliness into a chronicle of love. She wrote about motherhood, about marriage, about the beauty of being seen and known completely. One afternoon, as she sat at her desk writing a new entry, no longer hidden, no longer secret, just her thoughts for her family, Elias crawled up to her, pulling himself onto her lap. Ethan followed, leaning down to kiss her neck, his arms wrapping around both his wife and his son. "What are you writing now?" he asked, looking over her shoulder, his chin resting on her hair. Nina smiled, running her hand over Elias's soft dark hair, tracing the little features that were a perfect mix of them both. She read the words she had just written aloud, her voice soft and clear in the quiet room. "I used to write about being invisible," she read. "I used to write about being a shadow. I used to write about wishing someone would see past the surface and find the real me. And then, the impossible happened. I stepped into a life that wasn't mine, pretending to be a woman I was not, and somehow, I found the life I was always meant for. I became the substitute bride, and ended up being the only bride he ever wanted." She turned her head to look up at Ethan, her eyes shining with unshed tears of happiness. "Words brought us together. Words kept us together. But love is the story we are living now. And it is far more beautiful than anything I ever imagined or wrote down." Ethan turned her chair slightly so she faced him better, taking her face gently in his hands. "You were never a substitute, Nina. Not for a single second. From the moment I heard you breathe at that altar, you were the only one. You were the original. You were the truth. And you," Nina whispered, smiling, "you were just a name in a newspaper to me. A scary, powerful stranger I was forced to marry. And now, you are my whole world. Funny how life writes the best plots, isn't it?" Ethan replied with a grin. Just then, Elias grabbed the pen from her desk, waving it around like a magic wand, making them both laugh. Nina caught his hand before he could mark the pages of her diary. "See," Ethan said, tickling his son's tummy. "He's already a writer too. Just like his mother. He sees things differently. He feels things deeply. He understands silence and stories." Nina leaned back against Ethan's chest, holding her baby close, surrounded by the books that had started everything. She thought about how strange and wonderful it was, that two people who had never met, living in completely different worlds, had fallen in love simply because one wrote her heart out, and the other took the time to read it. It didn't matter that she had been a twin. It didn't matter that she had stood in the wrong shoes. It didn't matter that they started with a lie. Because the moment Ethan whispered, "Good. I never wanted your sister anyway," everything changed. The lie became the truth. The substitution became destiny. Chapter 12, the final page. Years later. The bookstore, Nina's Pages, was thriving. It had expanded twice, now including a small publishing house and a quiet cafe famous for its tea and homemade cakes. It was a sanctuary in the busy city, a place where people came to find not just books, but peace, community, and understanding. And Nina Hale Sterling was a name known everywhere. Not because she was a billionaire's wife, and not because she used to be mistaken for her sister. She was known because of her words. Her books were bestsellers, translated into dozens of languages, loved by millions. People wrote to her every day, telling her, "You put into words what I could never say," or, "You made me feel seen," or, "You taught me that quiet people have the loudest souls." She had achieved everything she ever dreamed of, and things she hadn't even dared to dream. It was a warm, golden afternoon. Nina was sitting in the garden of their home, under the old oak tree, the same place where she and Ethan had spent so many hours talking in the early days. She was older now, her hair streaked slightly with silver, her face showing the soft lines of laughter and happiness. Ethan sat beside her, his hand resting comfortably over hers, looking at her with the exact same expression he had always worn, pure, unmasked adoration. He had retired from the company a few years ago, handing it over to a trusted partner, saying he had spent enough time building empires. Now he wanted to spend his time reading books and being with his family. Running around the grass were two children, Elias, now a serious, intelligent boy of 10, and little Elena, their daughter, who had her mother's soft eyes and her father's determined spirit. They were chasing each other, laughing, carrying books they had pulled from the library shelves. "They are exactly like us," Ethan said softly, watching them. One quiet and observant, one loud and full of life. But both, completely ours. "Just like twins," Nina said with a smile, squeezing his hand. "But this time, no swapping places. No secrets. They know exactly who they are." Ethan turned to her, reaching into his pocket. "I have something for you." He pulled out a small, worn, leather-bound notebook. Nina recognized it instantly. It was the very first physical diary she had ever owned, the one she wrote in before she moved everything online, the one she thought she had lost years ago. "Where did you find this?" she asked, her breath catching. "In the back of the safe," Ethan replied. "With all the important documents. I kept it. I kept everything you ever wrote, Nina. Every scrap of paper, every note, every post, every book. Because every word of yours is precious to me." He opened it to the very last page she had written in it, years before the wedding. "I wonder if anyone will ever read these words," she had written in her young, messy handwriting. "I wonder if anyone will ever understand. I feel like I am writing to the wind, throwing my thoughts into the dark, hoping someone catches them." Ethan looked at her, his eyes bright with emotion. "I caught them," he said simply. "I caught every single one. And I have kept them safe ever since." Nina leaned her head on his shoulder, tears rolling down her cheeks, happy and warm. "You were the only one who needed to," she whispered. She looked out at her children playing, at the beautiful house full of books, at the man who had loved her before he even knew what she looked like. She thought about Lena, who had written to them occasionally over the years, finally happy in her own life, far away, having learned that happiness isn't about what you take, but what you build. She thought about the girl she used to be, invisible, quiet, afraid, hiding behind a sister's identity and a pen name. She was gone now, replaced by a woman who stood tall, who spoke her mind, who wrote her heart openly, and who loved deeply. You know, Nina said, sitting up and looking at Ethan, people always ask me, what is the secret? How did we make this work? How did a fake marriage, a substitution, a secret diary, turn into this? And what do you tell them? Ethan asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Nina smiled, the same soft, knowing smile she had given him the first night they were truly alone together. I tell them, she said, that love doesn't look with its eyes. It looks with its soul. That you don't fall in love with a face or a name or a role. You fall in love with the person underneath it all. And sometimes, the best way to find someone, is to let them write their own story. Ethan laughed, pulling her close for a kiss, slow and sweet and full of a lifetime of love. Perfect answer, he murmured against her lips. Just like everything else you write. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Nina reached for her own current diary, a beautiful new book, a gift from Ethan on their 20th anniversary. She opened it to the very last page, the final blank space. She took her pen, paused for just a moment, and wrote the final words of this chapter of her life. And so, the story ends exactly as it began, with words. But this time, they are not written in silence, or in hiding, or in fear. They are written in light, in truth, and in love. I was the replacement bride, but I became the love of his life. And that is the best story anyone has ever told. She closed the book, set it aside, and stood up to run after her children, her husband following close behind her. There were no more secrets. There were no more substitutions. There is only Nina, and Ethan, and the beautiful, quiet, wonderful life they had built together, one word at a time. The end.